municipal planners are booking country music stars and, firing up the grills at local restaurants.
Yeah, and aggressively filling public swimming pools for the big summer tourist rush.
Exactly. But meanwhile, underneath those very pools, the environmental water reserves for the entire region are sitting at statistically, well, exactly zero.
It is just a stunning paradox.
Right.
I mean, you have a local government intentionally throttling the basic resources of its own residents just to...
To artificially sustain this economic illusion of an endless summer for visitors, right?
Basically.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking a really fascinating stack of sources from today, Thursday, May 28, 2026, and the through line connecting everything we're about to explore for you, from high-stakes global diplomacy to a razor-thin Supreme Court ruling all the way down to those Colorado mountain towns, is this inescapable theme of systems operating entirely on single points of failure.
Right.
We are looking at massive societal structures balancing on the absolute thinnest of margins.
We often just assume the systems governing our lives, international supply chains, the justice system, our local utility grids, we assume they're robust and deeply anchored.
Sure, yeah.
But the data crossing the wires today tells a completely different story. It reveals how much administrative force is actually required just to maintain a baseline of order.
Right. Now, before we jump into the details, I do need to make something explicitly clear to you, our listener.
Yeah, this is important.
Today's sources contain some highly politically charged content. We are going to be discussing recent U.S.-Iran military conflicts, direct statements from the current presidential administration, and a highly sensitive Supreme Court ruling. So we want to be absolutely clear here. This deep dive is entirely impartial.
Totally.
We are not taking sides, and we are not endorsing any political viewpoints. Our sole mission is to unpack and convey the factual events and ideas exactly as they are contained in the original source material.
Right. Our focus is strictly on the mechanics of these events.
Mm-hmm.
We're just trying to understand how they ripple through the broader systems that we all rely on.
All right, let's unpack this. We are starting with the most dominant headline crossing the national and international wires this morning. U.S. and Iranian negotiators have just reached a tentative 60-day agreement.
Why?
They're extending an active ceasefire and launching formal negotiations regarding Iran's nuclear program.
And, to really grasp the gravity of a 60-day window, we have to look at the immediate kinetic context here. This is a sudden, aggressive halt to a military escalation that was, frankly, spiraling out of control just hours prior.
Oh, absolutely. The timeline leading up to this is incredibly dense. So earlier this week, U.S. forces shot down Iranian drones near the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah.
And following that, the U.S. conducted what the Pentagon termed self-defense strikes on specific targets along the Iranian coast.
Which, as you'd expect, triggered a direct reciprocal response.
Right.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard explicitly targeted the American base that launched those initial strikes. And the escalation didn't stop there. Late Wednesday, Kuwait intercepted a volley of missiles launched from Iran. Yeah, a move the U.S. military immediately labeled an egregious ceasefire violation.
So the kinetic conflict is violently hot right now. And President Trump actually addressed this directly during a cabinet meeting on Wednesday.
He did, yeah.
He indicated that while he is officially seeking a diplomatic resolution, the U.S. might have to, quote, finish the job if he isn't satisfied with the diplomacy.
Right.
And crucially for the domestic consumer, he simultaneously dismissed concerns over the rising cost of living and the spike in gas prices that are currently being driven by the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz.
And we have to talk about the Strait of Hormuz because it is the ultimate geographic single point of failure.
Totally.
You're talking about a waterway that is only 21 miles wide at its narrowest point.
That's so small.
It is. And the actual shipping lanes that those massive supertankers use, they're only 2 miles wide in either direction.
Wow, just 2 miles.
Yeah, 2 miles. Yet roughly a fifth of the world's total oil consumption passes through that tiny geographic bottleneck every single day.
Okay, so that brings up something I've always found confusing, honestly.
What's that?
Well, the U.S. produces a massive amount of its own energy now, right?
Right.
So if a drone is shot down over a 2-mile shipping lane in the Middle East on a Tuesday, why does a domestic consumer in, Ohio see the price of a gallon of gas spike by Thursday?
Yeah.
Because the oil on those ships wouldn't have reached the U.S. for weeks anyway, right?
That is the classic illusion of the physical supply chain versus the financial supply chain.
Okay, break that down for me.
You aren't paying for the oil that was on the ship today. You're paying for the maritime assurance premiums and the commodities futures market, panicking about tomorrow.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, when missiles are intercepted near Hormuz, Insurance companies instantly skyrocket the cost to underwrite a supertanker moving through that strait.
Which makes sense, the risk is huge.
Exactly. So the oil companies pass that immediate financial risk directly onto the consumer at the pump.
Ah.
The actual barrel of oil hasn't physically moved any faster, but the risk associated with it has multiplied exponentially.
So the 60-day ceasefire, it basically feels like slapping a temporary steel plate over a massive pothole on a major highway.
That's a good way to put it.
Right, like you haven't actually fixed the structural integrity of the road and the cars are still driving over a dangerous cavity, but you've engineered just enough surface level stability to stop a massive pileup today.
Exactly.
So my question is, how does a temporary 60-day administrative patch actually function when the underlying geopolitical and economic pressures are still fundamentally broken? Like hitting the pause button on a pressure cooker doesn't turn off the heat.
What's fascinating here is that diplomats aren't using a 60-day ceasefire to solve a multi-decade nuclear crisis.
Okay.
They're using it as an economic pressure release valve.
Hmm.
You implement this pause to give the shipping conglomerates, the energy sector, and allied nations a predictable calendar to operate within.
Oh, so it's about predictability.
Exactly. It lowers those maritime insurance premiums we just talked about, and it calms the futures market. The global energy system was wobbling dangerously close to a pricing collapse, and this 60-day ceasefire is just the administrative force required to keep it functioning a little longer.
It's a calculated deferment of consequences. You buy 2 months of market stability, hoping you can engineer a better solution before the timer runs out.
Right. And if we shift our focus from international geography to domestic institutions, we see this exact same reliance on incredibly thin margins to maintain structural order.
Right, yeah. Let's look at the Supreme Court ruling that was handed down today.
Yeah, this is a perfect parallel.
So today, the Supreme Court issued a ruling in favor of Mississippi death row inmate Terry Pitchford. The court found that there was racial bias in the selection of the jury that ultimately convicted him.
Right.
But what makes this connect so seamlessly to our theme of single points of failure is the margin of the decision. It was a 5-4 ruling.
The absolute narrowest margin possible in that chamber.
Yeah. You have the ultimate legal mechanism in the country dealing with the highest possible stakes. I mean, a man's life on death row, and the constitutional integrity of the American jury system.
Huge stakes.
And the entire definition of justice pivots on one single individual's interpretation of the law. How does a question of racial bias in a capital case come down to a one-vote margin?
Well, to understand the margin, we really have to look at the mechanism of jury selection itself. Specifically, something called peremptory strikes.
Okay.
During jury selection, lawyers on both sides are allowed to dismiss a certain number of potential jurors without giving any reason at all.
Right. They can just say no thank you and the person leaves.
Exactly. However, under a precedent known as a Batson challenge, it is unconstitutional to use those strikes to exclude jurors solely based on race.
But wait, proving why someone did something without requiring them to state a reason seems legally paradoxical.
It is.
How do you definitively prove the intent was racial bias if the tool itself is designed to require no explanation?
And that interpretive bottleneck is exactly why the court split 5-4.
Ah, okay.
It comes down to differing judicial philosophies on how you evaluate intent. Some justices require a heavily documented, undeniable pattern of racial exclusion to overturn a capital conviction.
Like they want strict, almost mathematical proof of bias.
Exactly. While other justices look at the broader context of the prosecutor's historical behavior and the specific demographics of the dismissed jurors to infer discriminatory intent.
So 4 justices looked at the exact same trial transcripts, the exact same jury pool, and determined the legal threshold for racial bias was not met.
Right.
While 5 justices looked at those identical documents and determined a constitutional violation had occurred.
It really shatters the comforting illusion we have about justice being this monolithic, immovable pillar.
Yeah, it really does.
Whether it is a 60-day international ceasefire keeping the global energy markets from collapsing, or a narrow 5-4 judicial ruling redefining the boundaries of a fair trial major systems, rely on the absolute thinnest of margins. These are highly dynamic, incredibly delicate balancing acts disguised as permanent structures.
It totally reorients how you consume the news. You stop seeing events as isolated incidents and start seeing them as stress tests on these very fragile margins.
Absolutely.
So let's take that exact framework, that idea of tension, strict enforcement, and razor thin margins, and apply it to a micro level.
Let's do it.
I want you, the listener, to consider what happens when these pressure points exist in your local community.
Moving from the geopolitical and the national down to the municipal level.
Exactly. We are looking at Colorado's Eagle River Valley. And on the surface, reading the local municipal briefs, the town sounds incredibly vibrant right now.
It sounds great on paper.
Yeah. Despite all the geopolitical heaviness dominating the national wires, the local ecosystem in the valley is doing everything it can to artificially kick off the arrival of local summer.
They're desperately trying to execute that seasonal pivot.
It's a massive push. Public pools are opening valley-wide this week with weekend parties and live music. The town planners are heavily promoting these summer events to draw people in.
Right.
They just announced the highly anticipated country music lineup for the Gypsum Days Festival, which is scheduled for July 16th through the 18th, which is this huge celebration of small town traditions.
Sounds like a lot of fun, honestly.
It does. It's that time of year when locals would normally be hitting up vibrant community hubs, like, say, Avanti's restaurant, to celebrate the snow melting and the warm weather arriving.
It's the cultural and economic exhale after a long, grueling winter.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh boy.
Because beneath the pool parties and the country music festival announcements, there is a historic, terrifying environmental deficit.
Yeah, the water situation.
The late April SNOTEL assessments showed that multiple local basins in the area were at the 0th percentile for their snowpack baseline.
And let's make sure we unpack what that data actually means for you listening.
Yeah.
SNOTEL stands for snow telemetry.
Okay.
It's an automated network of weather stations high up in the mountains.
Right, but how do they even accurately measure the snowpack across entire mountainsides in late April? Are they just sticking giant rulers in the ground?
Well, no, it is much more sophisticated than that. They use these fluid-filled pillows hidden underneath the snow.
Wait, really? Pillows?
Yeah, basically. As the snow piles up, it compresses the pillow, and sensors measure the exact weight of the water content inside that snow, what they call the snow water equivalent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and when the data says multiple basins are at the 0th percentile, that is not just a dry winter. That means the sensors are registering a statistically unprecedented low for the modern era.
So it's essentially a blank slate where a massive frozen reservoir is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And because the snowpack acts as a time-release battery for the region's water, melting slowly and feeding the rivers all summer, the sudden absence of that snowpack means the battery is dead before summer even begins.
And that brings us to today.
Right. Because of this 0th percentile reality, the local river districts are hosting a massive joint water meeting in Vail today, May 28th.
And based on the agenda, I can tell you the tone of that meeting is not going to be celebratory.
Far from it. The Colorado River District General Manager, Andy Mueller, has explicitly warned of a grim hydrological outlook.
Grim is the right word.
Yeah. The primary agenda for today's meeting is to discuss implementing stricter enforcement and significantly stronger penalties and fines for excessive water use by residents.
So they are preparing to heavily penalize their own community just to preserve the baseline water supply.
Yes, and the friction goes beyond just the water supply. Because the landscape is so historically dry, the utility providers in the mountains are actively prepping for proactive power shutoffs.
That's intense.
They are ready to intentionally kill the power grid this summer because the extreme wildfire risks are so high that a single spark from a live utility wire could trigger a catastrophic inferno.
Wow.
And I have to push back on the morality of this municipal strategy here. This feels incredibly cynical.
How so?
Well, you have towns aggressively promoting summer tourism, inviting tens of thousands of people to pool parties and the Gypsum Days Festival, while simultaneously threatening to cut the power and strictly fine their own local residents for watering a garden.
Right.
How do local municipalities successfully balance the economic necessity of summer tourism with the harsh reality of punishing their own people with strict resource fines? Like it's throwing a pool party on a sinking ship.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals the fundamental resource paradox that defines modern mountain economies. The valley is trapped.
Trapped how?
Well, you mentioned the aggressive push for summer tourism. That isn't just civic pride. It is absolute economic desperation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the sources note that this past winter saw a 14.9% decline in skier visits for Vail resorts.
A 14.9% drop. For a town whose entire financial bedrock is winter tourism, that has to be devastating.
It is. We are talking about massive losses in municipal sales tax, property tax, and business for local restaurants.
So the summer has to make up for it.
Precisely. The local economy absolutely demands high-volume summer events to fill that massive fiscal crater left by the winter decline.
Mm-hmm.
They need the tourists to flood into Gypsum Days. They need them spending money at places like Avanti's. They need that cash flow just to keep the town solvent.
But the environment simply doesn't have the hydrological capacity to support that influx of people.
Exactly.
So the economic engine is demanding maximum output to survive, but the environmental fuel tank is sitting at the 0th percentile.
So the municipality is forced to artificially engineer a balance. They have to invite the tourists to keep the local economy from collapsing, which means they have to aggressively squeeze their own local residents through fines and water restrictions to ensure there's actually water flowing through the pipes when those tourists arrive.
That's a brutal daily calculus.
It is. You are watching a local government try to artificially balance economic survival against environmental reality.
And just like the 60-day ceasefire in the Middle East, these local water fines and power shutoffs are temporary triage.
Yeah, completely.
They aren't solving the fact that the climate is fundamentally shifting. They are just emergency administrative patches being used to survive the immediate season.
It requires a profound amount of administrative force just to maintain the illusion of a normal summer.
So what does this all mean? When we look at this entire stack of sources from today, May 28th, 2026, the overarching narrative is undeniable.
It really is.
Whether you are feeling the sudden economic squeeze of gas prices because of military blockades in a 2-mile shipping lane in the Strait of Hormuz, or you are watching the Supreme Court redefine a man's life and our national justice system by a single interpreting vote, or you are living in a mountain town that is simultaneously throwing summer pool parties while threatening you with severe water fines and intentional power shutoffs.
Yeah.
Our systems are being stress tested to their absolute limits. The margin for error has completely evaporated. We are entirely reliant on these temporary, razor-thin solutions just to maintain the facade of a normal Thursday.
It is an incredible amount of structural tension to live under. And leaves me with one final thought to mull over, looking at how all these different systems, from global diplomacy to local utilities, are reacting.
What's that?
But it raises an important question about a concept we could call engineered scarcity.
Engineered scarcity as a defense mechanism.
Yes. Today's sources show us relying heavily on intentionally engineering scarcity to prevent a larger systemic collapse. Whether it is a utility company intentionally shutting down the power grid to prevent a valley from catching fire, or a river district heavily restricting and finding water usage to survive a historic drought, or even on a global scale, using economic blockades and military sanctions in warfare.
We're intentionally turning off the taps of modern convenience and resources just to survive.
Exactly. But as these temporary emergency measures become annual, unavoidable realities, we have to ask ourselves, what happens to the psychology of a society when scarcity and intentional shutoffs transition from being an emergency backup plan to being the permanent, everyday baseline of modern life?
Man, that is a heavy, necessary question. If we are constantly applying temporary patches to these incredibly fragile systems, do we just learn to live with the anxiety of the impending structural failure?
It seems like we might have to.
Yeah. Well, thank you for going on this journey with us today. Keep asking those big questions. Keep looking closely at the margins. And maybe we'll see you at Avanti's restaurant to decompress. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.